He walks into my office one day and he says, "Hey, Travis, you want to know what's wrong with black people?" "Yeah, Dave. Tell me what's wrong with black people."
A white man can get up and say, "Give me liberty or give me death." Black man says that, he's a criminal, he's a thug, he's a miscreant.
What's the plan? What's the goal? What are we willing to do to sacrifice to do this? And what our plans are if it pops off. Like my question was, do we need to arm up? Like, what are we talking about?
For those that are ready, let's begin the conversation. Going back to some of the topics that we were just talking about with regards to, Morehouse versus Ivy League, and, reaching back and helping our people. I give you a real question that was asked of me by a former vice president that I worked for, and his name was Dave. We'll leave it at that, right? And he was a VP. I reported up to him as a senior manager. And he walks into my office one day and he says, "Hey, Travis, you want to know what's wrong with black people?" And he says, "You got two black people ascending up a mountain. You get halfway up the mountain and the black person will stop in the middle of the mountain, turn around, reach his hand down to help the black people behind him, help them start to come up the mountain, while the white person continues up to the summit. And then he owns the summit. And you black people keep sitting down there trying to help everybody and you don't own shit. You need to fucking own stuff if you want to make decisions in this world. We don't own shit." I thought it was like, I don't know why he kept telling me that, but it means something to me now that we don't own anything. So we talk about the Morehouses, we talk about the Ivy League, and you're talking about getting into positions so that somebody can hire us. Are we having a conversation about owning the summit or owning a piece of the pie? We talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma and Rosewood, and we talk about Black Wall Street and how they burned it down. We could talk about how we had hope and change, between 08 and 16, and we thought that the coming had come upon us again, and we were there, and then they burn it down when 45 gets in office, and he's doing everything he can to burn that shit down from us too. And now we're back here at the starting block again. Are we? And this is where it's going to lead to my final question about, whether we're in a moment or whether we're in a movement. And that's what I need to know at the end of this. Are we going to own it, or are we just going to accept the moment and mark this place in history? And then we can say, well, 2020 was just a fucked up year and we moved on. I'm trying to get where we are at the end of this. I'm not expecting us to have a definitive answer, but it's food for thought from you guys.
Well, I have problems with your analogy. But
it wasn't mine. It was his.
Yeah. The first problem with the analogy is that the white man is telling black people to be cutthroat to get to the top. Number two, we need to own our own mountain versus trying to get to the top of theirs. Now we're on the top of their mountain, but we left all of our people behind. So what are we doing? We're going to become them. And we're going to be starting racist against people because we want our people up top. So now we're not going to let the white people up top so we can get our own people up top.
But the point of the analogy was you're trying to help somebody get somewhere when you haven't arrived there yourself. You can't help people when you haven't gotten there yourself.
Yeah, that is the only way to get there. Is the only way to get there to leave your man behind?
The thing was, you got to do what you got to do to get to the top to own the decision-making tree. You can't be a part of the tree and make the decisions. You got to own the tree. And that's where
goes back to the Morehouse Penn conversation.
Right. And that's why I'm saying I tied that conversation made me think of the conversation in which I had with him back then.
I'm all about ascension, but I'm not about like stepping on necks to get there. Like that doesn't make sense.
We're climbing up the mountain, Travis, and we stop. Come on, brother, I got you. And we get up And then one gets 2, and 2 gets 4, and 4 gets 6, and 6 gets 8, and then we get up there and we get to the top of the mountain to find out that it said whites only. Harriet Tubman said, yes, I played a large part in freeing a lot of slaves, but I would have freed more if they knew they were slaves. The job has been done. When are we gonna own? Jay-Z said it. Look, when this NFL deal went down, I'm just trying to get at the table, y'all. And I don't know a bigger fan of Jay-Z than me. I'm a groupie. But when he said that, I'm like, all right, Hov, okay. But all you rap about and all you brag about, what is it really doing? Is it serving you, or is it serving a cause? Then you got the black person. Why we always gotta serve a cause? Why can't we just have? Why can't we just be? Why can't we just work hard and get with? Hey, they control the narrative. We have to rewrite the narrative. It is it's simply stated. We have to control our narrative. And you, Cousin Travis, and you, Cousin Keith, as well as me, work hard to control our narrative. But it dichotomizes us. Now, as revved up as I am and as passionate as I am, you and you, we ride past the dude at the red light with the squisher. Yo, get the fuck out of here. We like, no, I don't need you. No, I ain't got no money. We're in a systematic world that was concocted, created, founded, matured, manicured, pedicured, and maintained by criminals. That's what we exist in. And when you're criminal-minded, look, a white man can get up and say, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. He's a hero. He has a statue. Black man says that, he's a criminal, he's a thug, he's a miscreant. None of this design, none of this concoction, none of this creation had us in mind. So we've got to pause there sometimes and stop thinking that it includes us. It doesn't. In many, many more facets than we give credit to. It does not. We just haven't died off. However, we're here. So yes, Travis, this is a movement. I hope it doesn't turn into a moment, because as a black father of 3 black sons, I refuse to let it be a moment for them. So we're gonna have to make sure that we galvanize all that we can galvanize and make sure that they are armored with what they need to make sure that they can stand on their own too in all faces of what they're gonna come up against as men. So it won't be a moment for me. It will not be a banner for me. It won't be a sign for me. It's gonna be something that has been reawakened in me. I haven't felt this impassioned about moving the envelope and moving the conversations forward since I was a student in college. So unfortunately, it will become a moment for some, because like a lot of people we know, maybe present company included, depending on what bills are due, what are we willing to risk to make sure this movement happens?
That's my question.
Are you willing to risk it all?
What's the plan? What's the goal? What are we willing to do to sacrifice to do this, right? I asked my wife the other day, because she had some concerns about what's going on and what our plans are if it pops off. Like, my question was, do we need to arm up? Like, what are we talking about? Maybe. Like, that's the fear, is that this movement is going to get pushback. No different than the movement to elect President Obama is the catalyst for the pendulum to swing back as hard as it did and elect a reality TV star anyway. So like that movement, that white power, white nationalist movements, that pendulum swing back, we're gonna stand up today as Black people and say this is enough. And again, Gen Z, from the people I talk to in the things that I've seen, is like, look, Gen X, millennials, boomers, y'all had your opportunity. Y'all marched in peace. Y'all, you've been to the mountaintop. F all that, we doing it this way. We about to wreck it. And again, so I think there's a dichotomy within the movement. There's disorganization within the movement. There's no leaders, as you mentioned at the opening, in the movement.
And to your point about, are we in a precarious situation right now where I believe something unfortunate is going to occur? It's going to get worse before it gets better with regards to what's going on out in the streets. That's why when it comes to the movement versus the moment, sometimes, and I'm not encouraging violence in any respect, but you got to tear some shit down in order to build it back up. And right now we're at a point where you got to, and then this is why part of this series is going to be talking to the Gen Zs and the millennials, because they have been awakened. They thought they lived in a colorblind world where it didn't matter about what color you are, it's just the content of your character sort of life. And then when they saw their first lynching in real time on their on their social media platform,
first.
Well, no, but they didn't see. And to that point, Mark, I'll bring it up. Each one of those deaths was grayed out with some kind of skepticism that this was, could have, should have, if he had done, hadn't done. There was gray. Now yes, there were true tragic deaths from our vantage point that they killed him. There was absolutely zero gray with regards to the killing of Mr. Floyd. You saw a lynching from the beginning to the end, and that fucked up the core. Even white folks were like, wow, we can't argue this one. That was a fucking lynching that happened live. So that shook the people when they realized, wow, they do treat Black people differently. That's how this whole movement began with regards to where we are today. All the BLM stuff before, all the deaths before, we don't take anything away from them. They were tragic in their own right. But you cannot say that that this one was the same as those with regards to how clear what happened.
You don't think it was a straw on top of Eric Garner, on top of
I think it was a straw.
On top of Breonna Taylor?
Absolutely. I think it was a straw, but I think it clearly defined what the others were. It accented them. If you look back at any one of those cases, you say you got Eric Garner. Similar scenario where he gets choked out. But there was gray. There was gray in there. You didn't see the whole thing. It was gray. You saw the callousness. You saw the dude put his hand in his pocket. You see 4 officers who got this guy handcuffed. He's detained. He was put in a police vehicle and then pulled out of the police vehicle. Then he was placed. I mean, there was no room for gray in there. And when you have that, it stirred up these millennials. So that's why part of this series is going to be about talking to those millennials. What did you see? What does it mean to you? What do you want to have as an outcome? Because as you say, they're saying we gave you old cats your opportunity.
Can you ask the millennials if they saw the same state, the Minnesota police officer shoot Philando Castile in the front seat of his car live on Facebook? Okay, the death of Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, right? We could go on about, they're around for this. We're not talking ancient history.
But if you ask the question, and I will, if any one of those cases, when they did the narrative, and it's just to Mark's point about changing the narrative, because they changed the narrative in this one. Well, it was if they had not done, if Michael Brown had not,
right?
If they had not done, right? If Sandra Bland had not, she got pulled over for what? A taillight? Ends up dead in jail. If they had not.
Yes.
What did George Floyd do that people can go back and say, if he had not. Other than you're trying to say he was
They are saying
George Floyd was contained and detained because he just committed a crime.
well, allegedly
That's
that
right.
he had passed a fraudulent bill, but he did not resist at any time. He called everybody respectfully by sir. He was calm and already detained. He was placed in the back of the vehicle. They then called for support. Then the officer comes in. They remove him from the vehicle, and now he's on the ground with three men on his back and neck.
That's not the narrative. That's not the narrative. The narrative is that he was drug addicted and that he was committing a crime and that the store owner called. And yes, we saw the videotapes pull him out without resisting. We saw them put him in a hold. We saw them stay there until the ambulance got stopped, put in park till they brought out the whole chair, the bed, and then he got off his neck.
Correct. But there was no gray. There was no gray about the lynching.
On top of the fact that no medical personnel ever emerged from the EMT, they were police officers. But Travis, I saw no gray 30 years ago in Los Angeles by this brother named Rodney King.
Yep.
If once you control the narrative or have control of the narrative through every pocket you can imagine, they control the narrative through law enforcement. Look, we're one of 3 countries in the world that have a system called criminal justice. That is the most paradoxical phrase I've ever heard in my life. When do criminals get justice? You know when criminals get justice? When criminals concoct the system. We have always seen them control the narrative through portals. Law enforcement, government, media. When you control those 3 portals, you, no pun intended, get away with murder. So, yes, I'm at a point now where it is conflicting. I've been playfully saying it all night. It depends on the day of the week. Sometimes it really does. I am at a point of confliction because I'm riled up. I'm ready to go, but now more is at stake for me. When I was 19, 20, 21 years old, when I stood on the lawns of Delaware State campus and stood in front of canine dogs and state troopers and told them to get off my lawn, told them to get off my property. I pay rent here, you don't. I'm not going in my dorm. I had people grabbing me in court, trying to quiet me down from going back at a judge who referred to us as you people. I was there. But see, now I got children. Not only do I have children, I have sons. Not only do I have sons, I have Black sons. So I have to be mindful of the car I get in now and how I drive. So I, want to say a couple of things. The quick story I wanted to share before Keisha caught your attention. When I went to Africa, I went to Goree Island. Goree Island is the first island where they deported slaves. The Portugals were the first to purchase slaves from Africa, and this is the place where they first deported slaves. And I went to a place they called the Door of No Return. But in the basement of this facility, the lower level of it, is where they contained and detained slaves, and they separated us immediately. They separated us from elderly women and elderly men to men and women and to children. And when a slave was recalcitrant, this is exactly what the box was labeled, recalcitrante, which in French means recalcitrant, which means stubborn and unwilling and reluctant. When we were recalcitrant, they placed us, regardless of the risk of the break and fracture of limbs and the rip and rupture of muscles and tendons, in this box. And this box was probably 5 times wider than the box we're talking in on Zoom. And every time that a slave rebelled or showed resistance, they were put in this box. Back in 1996, I made a commitment to myself that I'm not fitting in anyone's box. Now that's a dangerous kind of slope to ski on as a Black man, particularly as visibly as a Black man as I am. But if I can't sleep and can't rest in the pride and the edification of my culture, then I don't seem and deem worthy. So it's tough, it's rough, and it's dichotomous, but I'm getting more and more day acclimated to the notion that, as you coined earlier, there has been no quiet and docile revolution. There has been no revolution that's been absent of violence. And this particular revolution, absolutely, whether we wanted to or not, will be televised.
You know, Mark's story reminds me of, I'm older than you two a little bit. And I went to Rutgers University. Jesse Jackson came and we were doing a sit-in, which lasted 3 weeks. And this was for apartheid. And at the time, President Nelson Mandela wasn't the president, he was still a prisoner. So we sat in, you know, during this anti-apartheid sit-in. And since then, you know, I've probably been stopped by the police, I don't know, tens of times, 20 something, you know, all these years. I've been put in the back of a police car. I've been humbled in a way where, you know, I need to say yes, sir, in order to get out the situation. I've had to take my radar detector in a different situation, and I had a choice of taking a radar detector, which was illegal in Virginia, and put it behind my driver's side back tire and back up over it, or get the ticket. I've been pulled over in the middle of the night here in my hometown where I am now, and in a dark place where I was actually shook. It was 1:30 in the morning. Fraternity had a regional event. I hadn't had anything to drink since, like, I had a beer at 8 o'clock. It was 1:30 in the morning. Anyway, I was nervous. I got pulled over 2 weeks ago. And again, this was during the protests, and I was on high alert. My heart rate was up. So that's, you know, so this doesn't settle down. And my sons, I have one son and I have two daughters, and I'm constantly worried about them at all times. And having the pandemic and being at risk with precondition and being at risk with my age, all of those stressors happen. Now, you know, I could tell you stories about, you know, about situations that really involve my engagement with white people who did not understand me or where I was coming from or why I said what I said, even in the comedy world, right? So I'm you know, teaching improv. You know, I'm in business for improv, and I've done it for 10 years. And there's a lot of times where we'll do quick games, and it's like, give me 5 songs, and I'll name 5 songs, but they'll be R&B or hip hop songs. And it's like, why are your songs black? Well, because I'm black. What are you talking about? What kind of question is that, right? So you say fine, and then you start watching that some of the people that I'm talking to now, the owners of Second City and UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade in Chicago, and IO is closed. They've all been charged with racial inequalities, right? The people who are on SNL, same thing. There's a movement for Hoopla Improv where, you know, it's called Improv for Everyone. So there are Black improv teams that I found, and because why do we have our own teams? Because we have to. We have to, because the inclusiveness of even laughing together is one that turns into just turns into a separate situation. And, you know, it's just all societal pressures and all these things permeate into every single thing we do, who we are, how we shop. You know, I'm always worried about, like, people still lock their doors on me. They still, you know, move across the street. And the interesting thing is, this last couple of weeks, Cops have said hello, went out of their way to say hello to me. I went to Publix, which is a nice, I live in the suburbs, a nice supermarket. And there's every single person in there made sure they said, hey, how you doing to me that day? It was very strange. Not just the employees who are all charged with doing that. All the customers, everybody. And it was like, and again, things are so hot that there's an awareness which this movement has caused, which could turn into a moment if we're not careful. But the question is, what do we do with it? So yeah, this experience has been very interesting from a historical standpoint. If I look back on my journey and my path to today, so I appreciate you asking the questions you did today. And Mark, I appreciate the answers you gave and the honesty that you provided. I think this is, Travis, I don't know what we're supposed to do here. I don't have the answers. Like I need some, what's the plan? That's my question to everybody. What we doing?
Well, there's no answer. And, at the moment, I think that dialogue is important. And I think that the fact that even amongst ourselves, family members, that we've grown up, 50 plus years. Well, Mark's getting ready to celebrate 7 days. I know he's got a countdown going, baby. So we got 50 plus years going on here. And we've never really had a conversation like this before, where we talked about, some of our experiences. And, now we got children and, it's raw for me. I think that there's going to be something great that comes out of this on the other side. I think it's going to be a hard road that we're going to toe before we get there. I think I look back and say we had people and family members who went through, the civil rights movement and post Jim Crow and even in Jim Crow and before that. And we don't really know the true stories in which they've come through. We let that history sort of die. They just don't want to talk about it. And I'm thinking we need to talk about it. We need to talk about what's happening now. We need to capture this because one, it's going to help us know how to go forward. And two, we need to have the conversation with one another because if we don't, we're going to lose this time. This is that moment in history that we're going to look back upon and say, when did shit change? And I think I want us all to be part of that. And if not, we can at least document how we felt at the time.